it was quite different from when we last saw each other in January. You know, I actually what did it say? Like how great the conference was. You know, first time going to Chattanooga, but it's a wonderful place, and I really hope that next time we meet, it can be in person again because it was a lot of fun.
Oh, we hope so. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. That was that seems like an eon ago.
Doesn't it?
And that's a technical term.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is fun. So you've got a super interesting whole thing going on, and we'll dive into it. We're going to kick this off with a fireside chat. We're going to end the day with a fireside chat as well. And so just take a minute, Tom, tell us who you are and what you do for LabWorks and what LabWorks is.
All right, cool. So my name's Tom. I'm the founder of LabWorks. By trade, I'm a product designer. Now I guess a conversation designer. I've worked for a few kind of big consumer tech companies over the last few years, including Facebook. And then kind of got really interested originally in chatbots. My background before I was a product designer was as a journalist. And so I kind of thought, here's a product where words are the interface, and it was kind of a great kind of like melding of the two parts of my career. And I thought that kind of chatbots were really, really cool. But they were just the kind of like the hors d'oeuvre, the beginning, because then voice came along and I was like, wow, this is kind of a proper like paradigm shift. It was just kind of how easy it makes it to interact with technology. And, you know, alongside that, in my kind of personal life, I've been an avid gamer for a long time. I love playing games. And in particular, I love playing board games. And when kind of Alexa came to the UK, I saw this really interesting thing where it was a piece of, most bits of technology we own are kind of personal to us. It's like my laptop, my phone. And here was a device that was kind of shared amongst the household. And it kind of instantly tweaked with me that there was like an opportunity to build kind of communal experiences that were quite different from, you know, most of the tech experiences we were building at the time. And, you know, and I kind of saw this as a great opportunity to kind of take my love of board games and put a digital twist on them. And so that's kind of how we started building games. You know, I think my first game was a game called Would You Rather? And then it kind of went on to make True or False and Trivia Hero, and a few that if you play kind of games on Alexa, you might know them. And you know, we've been doing it about 3 and a bit years now. And I guess like most kind of people in the industry, we've been, you know, trying to say, well, we've got a lot of users, you know, we've got millions of users. How do we turn this into kind of a proper business? And I think one of the things that we've been kind of working very hard on at LabWorks is how do we make this kind of sustainable, move away from this kind of reliance on handouts from Amazon and towards a kind of a self-funding business model. And at least for us, kind of Voice Arcade is that answer. You know, it's a single monthly subscription that gives you access to all of our games. So, you know, instead of kind of having to buy like packs of questions in one or, you know, lives in another, you just sign up for a 99 cent a month subscription and gives you access to kind of the premium versions of everything. And we found that kind of radically simplifies everything, because you no longer have to worry about how do I kind of monetize this game specifically, or, you know, will users kind of complain that this type of content is being monetized? It's very easy for users to understand, okay, I pay the subscription and I get access to everything while I'm paying that subscription. You know, when we've done kind of user research and stuff, that's kind of, that value proposition has been really well understood. And so, yeah, we kind of think of Voice Arcade as a kind of a really great way to make it easy for users to pay for more premium experiences on voice, which I think is kind of very important for the kind of growth of the voice gaming industry as a whole, is to kind of train users to want to pay for more premium content. But we're still at the kind of the foothills of doing that, and you've got some great speakers coming up later, including Chris Morrow straight after that. What they're doing with Starfinder, and the kind of the value proposition they're providing with that is just incredible. So I can't wait to hear that one.
Yeah, no, me neither. So yeah, you covered a lot of ground just there. Yeah, so you are right there on the frontier of everything voice and gaming. You've been doing it for 3+ years. That automatically puts you into the 99 percentile. Okay, then you come up with this voice arcade thing, and I really want to drill down on this. So I should probably know this. I don't. I'm going to plead ignorance. What is the cost of voice arcade per month? And also within that business model, do you charge for various upselling stuff or expansion packs or whatever, or when you have upgrades to games, you just make them behind the scenes and you don't charge anything else? Walk me through some of the model. Let's dive in on the model.
Yeah, so it's 99 cents a month. And that's kind of everything. There's nothing else to buy. You get all the kind of like new questions that we write, new games that we release, like everything is just covered in that 99 cents a month. And we think that makes things a lot easier, because it makes it really, really simple for users to kind of understand. And a big part of what we're trying to do at the moment is to get users to trust buying digital products with their voice. We're having to kind of teach them a new behavior to buy stuff using these kind of voice assistants, to buy digital voice experiences. And so we want to make something that's really, really simple and really easy to understand the value proposition, so that they can feel confident that they know what they're getting.
I like 99 cents. I think I had read that. That's beautiful. And the beautiful thing about that is that, if not any other reason, there's a lot of demotivation to unsubscribe from that. You know what I mean? Like, that's so low impact that you would just, even if you felt like you had played the games and maybe had gotten your money's worth or sort of gotten to the end of the content, you would wait it out a couple of months and see what else comes your way for that price.
The way that we like to think about it is that's $11.99 a year, which is roughly half the price of a board game. And so we like to think that most families buy roughly a board game a year, and a kind of year subscription to Voice Arcade is about half the price of a board game. So we think of it kind of very much in comparison to the board game market, rather than like other bits of kind of digital gaming, perhaps. We're not trying to go like console gaming of charging $40, $50, $60 for a product. We kind of recognize that voice gaming is a different space, and the kind of different rules apply.
What yeah, that's really interesting. What do you think is the state of gaming on voice ecosystems right now? We've walked through. I was sort of reminiscing about some of the data points along the way. We've had the Wayne investigation, which was maybe one of the first, if not the first, big game on Alexa. We've had Sensible Object, the stuff that they've done integrating voice into board games. We've had Saint Noir, which Nolan Bushnell got involved in, which is another voice integrated into a board game. We've had Skyrim Special Edition, which the media didn't even believe existed. Gamers didn't think it was real either. They thought it was a joke. We've had some different data points, and now what you're doing in Voice Arcade is definitely one as well. If you're having a conversation with a computer science person in college, or somebody thinking about you know, someone with some entrepreneurial tendencies thinking about getting into developing games for these platforms, what are you telling them?
Well, I guess it depends on how kind of much I want to kind of impress them. You know, I kind of like to be pretty kind of like straightforward. I'm not sure that, at least at the moment, the kind of the voice games market, it's not the same as the mobile games market. You know, you're not getting kind of companies churning out like 100 million revenues. You know, the reality is that every game developer on the platform is struggling with monetization. And I think that those data points that you mentioned are kind of point to that there are a lot of people that have invested in kind of big premium experiences once, but then haven't done the repeat. If you actually look at the number of developers out there that have launched multiple titles and continue to do so today, it's actually pretty small. And you can see from those people, you know, people like Matchbox, like Volley, that they are the ones that are kind of closest to cracking this kind of monetization question, because that's kind of the bit that's holding everything back at the moment, is that it's very hard to invest in the kind of the premium level of content that makes really immersive games without the kind of like the monetization to back it up. I mean, you know, you've got kind of Chris and the Starfinder team talking a minute. You know, that is an incredibly immersive game, and a brilliant game, but it couldn't have been done by an independent developer, because we just don't have the kind of money to put on an experiment like that with kind of unproven revenue. Like, you know, Amazon can afford to kind of, you know, back its own product and invest heavily in something to kind of try and prove out the case. But for an indie developer, you just couldn't commit that kind of revenue at the moment. And you see the kind of the teams that are having the most success tend to be the ones that have figured out how to produce these experiences fairly lightweight, you know, to try and kind of keep the cost down and, you know, manage to kind of make money out of that. You know, we're not in the kind of you know, the Candy Crush era of churning out kind of huge amounts of money and billion-dollar valuations yet. You know, obviously, as a founder, I hope that will change. You know, not necessarily that worried about becoming a billionaire, but, you know, it would be nice if the kind of the industry grows, and I think that it will. I mean, you know, when we talk about kind of board games, that's a multi-billion-dollar industry a year anyway. So, you know, even if we could just take a little slice of that, it would still be a really sizable chunk. Even before you start getting into kind of like mobile gaming or console gaming, or, you know, all the other things that could potentially be possible in the future. So yeah, who knows?
No, it's interesting to hear your thoughts on that. I've got another question that I definitely want to put in front of you while I've got you here for the next bit. I've reflected at times on the fact that with voice in general, so really since Alexa has come into the fore, you know, Google after that, when you think about the adoption and the ubiquity and the success and the growth of voice assistants, the mainstream ones, lesser known ones, everything that we think of when we're talking about voice technology and conversational AI, it seems to me that the more successful use cases, the things that have sort of jumped off already, it's been really thought through and explained. Here is not only how this works, but here is the time that you use it. So it's not just how, but it's when. The where is a given. So we're all, especially now, we're all in our homes. So the where is sort of abstracted out. It's how you use it, but it's importantly when. And with gaming, you know, you're a lifelong gamer, so am I. A lot of folks, you know, in this, who are registered for this, who are in here now, or who will be watching this later, are as well. And with gaming, you have this sort of carved out notions for board games, for console gaming, like on Xbox Live or PlayStation Network or Switch or whatever, of when that activity should occur. So like, I work all the time. So if I take a break to play Call of Duty at 11 a.m., you know, Central Time, I can do that because I do work all the time. But I feel weird because I've been taught, you know, that's weird, you know, that's not exactly societal norms. So we got these notions of time built in. For voice gaming, we don't. There's no concept, in my opinion, and I want to get your thought. This is a question, but to me, there's no concept yet that's been explained by Amazon, Google, or anybody else on when these games should be played. And as a consequence, you get these sort of inconsistent usage patterns, and you get here today, gone tomorrow sort of stuff, and that sort of thing. It's this immaturity of the market that eventually will get there. Your thoughts on all that?
Well, it's a very interesting observation. I mean, from our data, we quite clearly see an uptick in traffic from about mid-afternoon growing until about 10 p.m. That's in like each locale, and then trailing off. So that's kind of suggesting that, you know, part of it in the kind of the late afternoon, early evening is kind of kids coming home from school. And then it's kind of adults playing later in the evening. And, you know, when we do user research, that's kind of like borne out by that, that, you know, our games are designed to be communal. Like all of our games are designed to be played with other people. You can play them on your own, but if you play on your own, we're matching you with another player or another couple of players elsewhere in the world. If you play Trivia Hero, you're playing against all the other people playing Trivia Hero right now. They're kind of inherently social experiences. And I think that for me, that's a kind of like a core feature of voice gaming, is that it is inherently social. Just not in the way that we've thought of social gaming in the past when you think of like Farmville or whatever. And so I kind of see them really as I think that they tend to be more a replacement for like your family playing true or false over dinner instead of watching the TV over dinner. It's like, that's like a really common one that we pick up in user research, is that playing the games over dinner. You know, they're kind of like conversation starters. You know, one thing that I think is interesting that I just noticed Peter in the comments say is that cars are also potentially a big thing for voice games. And, you know, then that kind of potentially brings in like the morning and evening commute as well. I think that perhaps there's almost more of a question of like, when wouldn't you play voice games rather than when would you? I kind of think that, you know, when you think about kind of console gaming, that is an immersive activity that you need to carve out a period of time to do. You know, like I'm not going to play like Breath of the Wild for 5 minutes. Like, you know, I want to have like a good couple of hours to make it worthwhile. But, you know, like the daily quiz or something, it literally takes 3 minutes to complete. You can do it over breakfast. You know, it's like there's kind of, that's the great thing about voice games, is they're very like snackable. And actually, I think that creates kind of a whole load of additional like moments for gaming and moments for communal gaming in the households that didn't previously exist. So I think that's a really interesting thing too.
No, that's great. Yeah, that's I appreciate you contemplating that, and that's interesting insight. I'm going to dive into. We got 3 questions. If we're getting more people in the Zoom, if you got questions for Tom, put them in the Q&A. We're going to get to as many as we can over the next 8 minutes, and I'm going to hit these in order. I'm going to read it verbatim. So this is from Ben Bott and McCulloch. Is Voice Arcade exclusive to LabWorks Creations, or is it more like a video game publisher who releases works by other developers? Thanks.
Yeah, it's just LabWorks games. You know, we wanted, one of the things that we recognized through our user research of people that play games on voice is that the quality out there can be quite variable, and that's kind of like nobody's fault. The developer ecosystem to date has largely been kind of hobbyists that have built a project at some point as a kind of an experiment, and then have left it running. And unfortunately, a lot of those games have atrophied and are often fairly poor user experiences. And so we wanted Voice Arcade to be a kind of a space where a user could be confident that everything in Voice Arcade was always going to work, it was always going to have fresh content, that it would always be reliable. And we felt that right now the best way to control that was for us to kind of build all the games in that ourselves. Now, you know, never say never. Like, you know, in fact, I'm sure it's probably not a surprise that, you know, we kind of think like in the longer term, maybe we can partner with other developers to bring kind of great content into Voice Arcade. We just thought it was too complicated to do before it had even really launched.
Perfect. Perfect. I'm going to hit the next one. From Mark Tucker. What was the thought behind? What was the thought behind putting multiple games behind the Voice Arcade name? Did you see usage of all games go up once you did this?
Yes. So the idea of putting all the names behind the Voice Arcade game, behind the Voice Arcade name, was that we wanted a way that we could introduce new games to users. You know, one of the things that we found was that we had a lot of games, and you know, and they were kind of already quite successful. At least some of them were quite successful. But when you launched something new, it wasn't necessarily that easy to kind of get it traction. Discovery is still an interesting challenge. It's still quite hard on the platform. And by teaching users to kind of access our games via Voice Arcade, so, you know, you say, Alexa, open Voice Arcade, then it, you know, that means that any new game that we build already has a bunch of discovery available to it through that kind of Voice Arcade hub. And yes, we have found that that has been helpful in growing kind of traffic, both across our existing games and for new things that we're launching. You know, as much as anything, it's it just made things architecturally simpler, and you know, it kind of helped with kind of a lot of like technical challenges as well. So yeah, there were kind of two reasons for why we went that way.
Okay, excellent. This one is from Merrick. Hello, Tom. Great insight so far. Totally agree with you that monetization of voice games is really hard. Question: have you tried or heard of Kickstarter voice game projects?
We haven't tried it. I'm pretty sure Saint Noir was a Kickstarter, wasn't it? Originally?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that.
I actually don't have any like meaningful insights to share on that. Sorry. You know,
I think Sensible Object. I think one of the Sensible Object projects was Kickstarter also.
Yeah, that's quite possible as well. You know, they went on to get acquired by Niantic, so you know that's it can be done.
Yeah, that's not a horrible outcome. I'm going to hit this anonymous one last. From Amy Oliver, what predictions do you have on the future monetization of voice games?
I think that it is probably going to continue to be hard for the next year. I think that, you know, like, I should say that it is getting better. I think that the kind of people are starting to figure out what works. The platforms are starting to get more reliable, and, you know, making it a bit easier to monetize. And, you know, you can kind of see the future of that starting to kind of work out now. You know, this, I don't know anything, but I think that actually the next kind of wave of innovation is going to come when some form of advertising is allowed on these platforms. You know, when you look at gaming and kind of free-to-play gaming in the mobile app stores, advertising makes a huge contribution. It's more than half of the revenue. You know, everyone thinks, oh, it's all about kind of consumables and in-app purchases. Actually, advertising is really the kind of like the base load that that kind of powers most of the mobile gaming ecosystem. And it's only the kind of the relatively small numbers of like very successful games who are very good at doing in-app purchases, so kind of like Candy Crush or Clash of Clans or whatever, that kind of like bias that metric. So I do think that there is a need to kind of have that functionality out there from a kind of a skill developer point of view. I totally appreciate why it's not easy for the platforms to do, and that we've got to kind of find a way to balance that with something that's going to work for users and consumers. I'd be surprised if there wasn't kind of stuff going on in that space. I think that the platforms know that, you know, I mean, they can see that there has been like no knockout success in the monetization field so far, and they're going to still be thinking, what can we do to make that happen?
I'm going to give you, we got 3 questions in the thing. I'm going to give each one to you and hit me with 1 sentence, because we got about 1 or 2 minutes left. Okay, so we'll do this rapid fire. From an anonymous attendee, do you have any insights to share about user adoption and retention? That's wide open.
Oh yeah, it's a very wide thing. I mean, in general, like the platforms are kind of up and to the right. I think retention is it is improving. People are using their assistant devices more, you know, I mean, COVID especially, but you know, things are happening, and that is causing more retention. Has anything kind of like fundamentally changed in how these kind of platforms work? I'm not so sure about that. So it'll be interesting to see when kind of COVID ends, whether that effect persists.
The most surprising thing you've learned?
Well, Mark, you can ask me this directly, seeing he's one of our investors. But what's the most surprising thing that I've learned? How this is going to sound terrible, but like how like users often don't understand how the assistants actually work, and you know, the amount of time that we spend kind of fielding customer service requests for things that are you know, handled by the platforms, and I'm sure that they kind of get all sorts of stuff for our games, and it's, you know, it's a strange thing. I think that kind of weird like relationship between the kind of the assistant and the skills is still kind of not really that well understood by users.
And last one from Amy Stapleton, and this was mentioned in This Week in Voice VIP, because we talked about Matchbox creating a mobile app from one of their games. It seems like some of the other voice game studios are porting their games to mobile. Do you think this is required?
You know, I don't know if it's about getting more users. I certainly think it's to do with retention. You know, mobile has a lot better tool set for building out retention and building out loyalty that is currently missing on the voice platforms. And, you know, certainly when we kind of look at stuff like that ourselves, we tend to kind of think about it very much with the lens of retention rather than acquiring new users. There's kind of pretty much like wide open territory in terms of acquiring users on the voice assistants. You know, when you think about the kind of hyper competitive nature of the mobile app stores these days, I'd much rather be acquiring my users off the voice platforms. But yeah, the retention bit, there's still some pieces of that puzzle missing on the voice platforms that kind of going onto a mobile app can help with.
Tom, this was a pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You got it. We appreciate you kicking off Voice of Gaming with us. I am going to put you back as an attendee. Tom, we appreciate you.
I should just say, if everyone can follow us on Twitter at Voice Arcade, that'd be awesome.
There you go. And put that in the chat too.
Thanks.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you, Tom.
Bye.
Next up, we have got Chris Morrow and team from Amazon. And there's Chris right there. And let me find the rest of the team. Ezra, I'm going to assume this Ezra is you. I'm going to promote you. Chris, how are you?
Fantastic. How are you doing?
Doing good. And it's Jonathan Miller, right?
Jonathan Miller. Yep.
We got it, Jonathan M. So I'm going to assume that's him. Ezra, how are you?
Oh, wait.
There you go.
Hey.
All right.
There you
Still
go.
trying to figure out video conferencing after however many months.
Thank y'all for being here. Jonathan, there you are. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing good. You got some equipment behind you there. That's a nice look. Thanks to all three of you. We appreciate you being part of the Voice of Gaming with us. Chris, you and I had a chance to chat with each other a week or two ago, and just incredible respect for what y'all have done. Chris, I'm going to make you host so you can share slides.
Fantastic.
And let me click that. And
right.
yeah, thank y'all very much. Y'all will be off and running. I'm on mute. Thanks for being part of Voice of Gaming with us.
Absolutely. And really excited to be here. And, listening to Tom talk and some of the earlier panelists just reminds me of why I really just love this space. And it's just, I love the community. And, it's a lot of really smart people who believe in the space, and they're just, there's a lot of ideas going back and forth, and it's neat to be a part of. I just wanted to kick off with a just by starting looking at just a brief trailer, and I have to apologize up front just in case I don't know how to use Zoom, since it's not Amazon Chime.
Oh yeah, there's no sound, Chris.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Excellent.
So what you got to do is when you click share screen, there's a checkbox at the bottom. So like at the bottom of Zoom, you see share screen there. There's a checkbox at the bottom that'll say share audio or allow audio to be played.
Okay. Well, I will share that link in the chat, because I don't want to belabor the point, as it were. It's basically, and also how ironic is it that it's we created an audio only game, and all I can show you is the visuals to the trailer. That's
Well, Chris, if you did want to take the time to present that audio, there are some audio cues in my part of this presentation too, so it might be worth that.
I believe I have those. Not to belabor the audio point, but I have a mixer plugged into the audio source. Yep. What do you think about that? Pretty savvy. All right. I'm Chris Morrow. We've got Ezra Kim here, who was the lead developer. And then we've got Jonathan Miller, who is the lead sound designer. And we're going to spend a couple of minutes talking about Starfinder. We're going to go really briefly into a couple of topics for the three of us, and leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A, because in my mind, the goodness out of Starfinder is in venues like these and being able to sort of share that knowledge out with the community. So real quickly, Starfinder as a brand is one of two tabletop RPGs, tabletop role-playing games, the traditional type that you would play with pencil and paper and a group of friends, or a group of friends over Zoom. The content owner is Paizo Inc., and they are a traditional physical content publishing business, and then they also engage in licensing. So Starfinder on Alexa, so we set out to create a familiar tabletop role-playing game experience through the Alexa device. And so, these are a couple of the key characteristics for that experience. So 5 unique character classes. All the rule set was based on what folks from Starfinder would already be familiar with, turn-based combat and interaction-driven narrative. And we also wanted to test retention and the player's appetite for long-form episodic content. And so we ended up with, there's 7 total episodes. There's a free pilot episode that's about 30 minutes. And then there are 6 premium episodes that are about 90 minutes each, totaling between 8 to 12 hours of content, depending on the choices that your character makes. The thing that I'm going to talk about is we had this goal to target high autonomy players interested in RPGs. And then but the challenge being, we discovered very quickly that autonomy within a voice game is really difficult to manage. Because theoretically, a player could say anything, that once that mic opens, it's like it's the Wild West. And what we found is that part of this, we have 4 tenets around what the Starfinder essential experience is. And part of the essential experience we found to be agency, which is this idea that you, the player, drive and develop your character through meaningful decisions. Balancing meaningful decisions against the sort of open-ended nature of what happens when the microphone opens. And I was laughing at Tom's point earlier around sometimes the player they just don't understand. And they'll just say things that, I never would have expected. How do we balance those 3 things together? And what we ended up finding, and this is a good metaphor or sort of a good theme of Starfinder development in general, was we just had to iterate. We had to iterate a lot. This initial prototype, in the pilot episode, you and a non-playable character, RAIA, are sent down into some maintenance corridors where there have been some problems. This sets the scene, so you can imagine the paper prototype where it's simply the narrator, and they read the line, you reach a fork in the corridor, sounds awfully like a little bit like Zork. To your left, the corridor continues, snaking out of sight. To your right, you see a door with the words diagnostics in faded yellow paint. What would you like to do? And what we found is in UX studies and in play tests, the cognitive load here was too high. It was too high for the player to say, okay, I could go left, I could go right, but like, what should I do? I don't have enough context. I don't have a good framework for how to make this decision. And so after a number of play tests, this is what where we ended up.
Conduits large and small run along the walls of the passage. Occasionally, sparks fly out from where equipment has been ripped away.
Wait, do you hear that? Call me pessimistic, but I doubt that's the sound of helpful workers making repairs.
You continue, and the passage widens slightly, exposing a steel door to your right marked Diagnostics. It hangs slightly ajar, and you can hear muffled whimpers coming from behind it. The sound of clanking and scraping is louder now, but clearly coming from still further down the passage.
So what we did was offered the player much more context. If we continue on down the passage, sounds like there might be something dangerous. Oh, Bradley, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was. It sounds like you're distant. Yeah. So you're a little muffled after playing that audio clip. Not sure why.
How about now?
It's a little bit better.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. All right. Great.
It's still a little soft, but that's better.
How about now?
Yeah. Yeah. Keep going.
Keep going. How about now?
Better. Yeah. Much better.
Okay. Great. So after what we found was that giving the player the right context was really key to the experience. And what that led us to over a series of iterations was this understanding that it wasn't necessarily autonomy that players needed or wanted. It was volition. And there's a great talk. And actually, it's actually not in here, but I will post I'll post the link in the chat. But there's a great talk on volition in GDC, one of the GDC talks, where volition being different from autonomy being, I want to be able to do whatever I want to do. And volition being the player having meaningful decisions that feel appropriate to the situation at the time, to the context. And so what we ended up finding was players don't want to be able to make any decision at any time. And in fact, they want to be able to make these three types of decisions. And so we have per episode, we have strategic decisions, which will dramatically change the way that the story ends up. It might impact the ending that you get, or it's a major decision. But what we found is that requires a lot of decision making. So you have to be able to have the right context. We also had tactical decisions, which are more like what happened in the previous example. Do you go left or do you go right? Do you want to do this or do you want to do that? It's easier for the player. They're less risky. And then finally, emotive decisions, which don't actually have any bearing on the game or the narrative, but it's simply asking the player, how do you respond? Do you feel angry? Do you feel sad? Do you feel happy? Do you feel frustrated? And we found that blending these three types of decisions together are what make the player feel like they're actually, that they have the right level of agency and autonomy. And actually reinforcing that, we had to figure out, how do we say more with less, which is what Jonathan's going to talk about.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. And thank you also again, Bradley, and the organizers and moderators here for having us here to talk about our experiences. So my name is Jonathan Miller. I'm a sound designer and mixer with Clean Cut's Interactive Audio Studio in Washington, DC. And as you know, I was fortunate enough to be the lead sound designer on the Starfinder project. So we're talking about the decisions here. Decisions are the heart and soul of this Starfinder voice game. The choices and their consequences that players make are what add the depth and autonomy that make the game the engaging and immersive experience that it really is. And in order for those decisions to feel truly meaningful, the player really needs to be emotionally invested in each situation and the outcome of that situation. And really, one of the strongest tools we have for creating that emotional investment, especially in an audio-only game, is creative sound design. So today I want to talk a little bit about how we use sound design to create these emotional connections within the game and add weight to decisions. And then how we used it also to add texture and variance to weapons within the game that enhance the depth of the gameplay experience as a whole. So I'll start with this first bullet point, using immersive sound design to set the scene. So the game progresses through a series of locations, each with their own obstacles and dilemmas, and the players are presented with choices throughout the course of navigating these situations. These locations make up the Starfinder universe, and in the absence of visual cues, we really rely heavily on audio to bring these locations to life and to convey the moods and emotions that we want the player to be feeling in the moment. So I'm going to use a series of examples here from a location called the Docking Bay to help illustrate these points. To quickly set the stage for this first example, our heroes are arriving at the Docking Bay location, which is a new location in the game for what is supposed to be a routine rendezvous with another character. So Chris, if you could play example 1.
You step off the maglev into a bustling docking bay with the number 94 painted huge on grimy metal walls. Passengers mill around the landing skids of various shuttles, while dock workers in lumbering cargo lifters stomp between them, carrying shipping crates. A serious-looking human shoves brusquely past you, rushing to get into the docking bay.
Move it, tourist.
You move it.
All right, so So in this scene, we're introducing this new location and starting to put the player in the character's shoes. So as usual, and as you hear throughout this game, we have this brilliantly descriptive storytelling. And our immersive sound design here is really working to make this location feel real in the player's mind and to start building some emotional ties with the situation. So as we progress through this docking bay location, we eventually spot our friend in the crowd who we're there to meet. But as you go to meet him, there's an unexpected development in your situation. So as we play this next example, kind of pay attention to how the mood shifts as the scene unfolds. Chris, if you could play example 2.
There he is.
You spot a middle-aged dwarf matching Creel's description, recognizable also by the compass-like symbol of the Starfinder Society, emblazoned on his coveralls. You start in that direction, but RAIA grabs your arm.
Hey, what's up with them?
While most of the people in the docking bay are going about their business, a number of hard-looking individuals are moving furtively through the crowd. Suddenly, one of them pulls a gun. You yank RAIA down behind a shipping container just as the dock erupts into chaos. You see Creel go down as a laser lances through his throat.
All right, so I think the Zoom game control cut out some of those backgrounds, but hopefully you could notice how as this gunfight breaks out, our background and our immersive sound kind of shifts to the scene of this frenzied crowd, and it kind of invokes these feelings of chaos and tension within the player. You're also hearing your friend who he gets killed right in front of you in a pretty graphic manner, which also adds to the danger and the gravity of the situation. So at this point, we've used immersive sound design to paint a picture of our surroundings, to establish this chaotic mood and sense of urgency, and hopefully to create an emotional connection to the situation within the player that really motivates them to want to find a way out, which in turn really adds weight and meaning to the decisions that they're going to have to make moving forward. So moving on to the next point, what I want to talk about is how we use sound design in a different way to add texture and variance to gameplay items. So another aspect that adds depth and autonomy to this Starfinder Alexa experience is the player's inventory, and specifically their ability to choose between various weapon styles and upgrades that they can then use in combat. This is another scenario where without any visual cues, we're really leaning heavily on the sound design to give the player audible feedback about the choices that they're making in the game. So as a player progresses through the game, they earn credits that they can then redeem to purchase new weapons. It adds a really great layer of personalization to the game, but without any in-game evidence of those personalizations, that feature could really easily be forgotten and that effect would be lost. So we wanted to figure out how we could use sound design to give each weapon type its own texture and flavor that would really help sell that personalized effect and give the player the satisfaction of hearing their weapon in the game after spending those hard-earned credits to purchase their upgrades. So we accomplished this by creating a unique set of sounds for each class and each type of weapon, which were then called dynamically in our combat sequences based on the weapon that the player currently had equipped. So what this means is that every time the player was in combat, the weapon that they had chosen would be reflected back to them through the unique sounds of the attacks and hits and misses of that weapon. I have a couple examples here to play to show you what this kind of sounds like in practice. One of the weapons a player can purchase is called a scorch gun, which is a ranged fire-based weapon. So here's what a successful attack with the scorch gun would sound like in combat. All right, so you can kind of hear how the initial attack sound, which would be the sound of the gun firing, and then the impact sound that follows, which is the sound of that attack hitting its target. They each have these distinct characteristics that tie them to the type of weapon, which in this case, it's a fire-based weapon. So let's compare that with the same assets for the machine gun weapon type. All right, so sounded like maybe a little bit of the same issue with Zoom ducking that audio, but kind of the idea is that there are distinct differences. So the machine gun has a very more kinetic feel to it. It's a kinetic weapon type, and also on impact, you hear like a series of bullets versus kind of the flamethrower fiery style of that previous weapon. And when you consider that these variations are applied to all the other weapon types and all the other weapon classes, which include melee, grenades, magic, and so on, and each of those have their own set of unique sounds, you can really see how there's an endless number of ways that the player can personalize their experience. And having that audio feedback in the game really works to enhance that feeling of satisfaction and that connection the player feels when they hear that custom experience reflected back to them in the game. So tying that back to the main theme, this really also serves the goal of giving the player more autonomy within the game and adding meaning to those autonomous decisions by having them reflected back in gameplay. So those are just a couple of the ways that we use sound design to really enhance the gameplay experience for this game. And with that, I will pass it back to Chris. Thank you very much.
Yep, next up, we've got Ezra Kim, who is going to talk about managing all this autonomy we were giving the players.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ezra. I was a developer with the Starfinder project, and I am no longer with Amazon currently, but I am here to just kind of talk about our experiences managing the narrative explosion, as you can imagine, with all the choices. So it goes along with a lot of the things that Chris already talked about and Jonathan already talked about with sound design and stuff like that. So with the Volition, which by the way is a talk from Scott Rigby, which is a great talk in GDC, and he also has this book, which I don't remember the title of, but I feel like every game designer who's interested in game design should probably look into it, because it all goes with the narrative management as well. So there are bunch of choices, and we trimmed it down to some of the better, more impactful, more meaningful decision. However, there are still cases of managing those choices so that it doesn't explode the narratives too much. It's already, even the trimmed down version in its final form is huge in terms of content and amount of audio that you need to record, and in terms of amount of work that needs to be done in terms of writing, editing, and also even the system that could handle all those decisions. If you go to the next slide, there's an example of, well, so this is the result, actually. I don't know what happened to the RAIA, but just to talk briefly about it, basically there was a decision initially when we added this component of having a companion. So when we're focusing on the tabletop RPG game and what it feels like and what we enjoy on tabletop RPG is playing with the friends and working with decisions that are not purely yours, but working with decisions that your friends or people around the table are making and then going off of it. So adding this new companion gives that feeling of relationship, having a relationship in the character form of, hey, my character has this type of relationship with this other character that is going on an adventure with me. And initially when we were adding it, there was the problem of making that a choice, of having to say, hey, here's a RAIA character that wants to go along with your, go on your adventure together. However, by adding that decision of saying, hey, you can add this character versus not, the narrative component, you can imagine, has doubled, right? Because for every scene that you're describing how it's playing out, you have to add a version that is with RAIA in the background, making a sassy comment versus without. And this is a very difficult decision to make when you're just kind of focused on the fact of, hey, we want the players to have all the decisions possible. We want them to feel the quote unquote autonomy and make their own decision. And that is the trap that we were about to fall into. Actually, when we played through iterations of play tests and all that, and even ourselves, and focusing on what feels good, what is the best experience, it turns out that the experience without RAIA, no matter how well we like wrap it up and put a bow on it, is not the same. And it's not even remotely like close to being good as having the RAIA character. So we actually removed that decision, and that had a two effect, right? So first, it reduced the potential amount of content that needed to be written and recorded, hence increasing the cost of production and whatnot. And also, it made the potential for bad experience go away, right? So when we decided that, okay, well, when we observed that the experience without this companion character is subpar, removing that actually guarantees more players are faced with the better experience. So there are some decisions that needed to be made in that way, and there are a lot of other things, other examples that goes along with that. So reason I'm mentioning this, and the previous slide showed also the kind of the existing narrative structures when it comes to interactive fiction, is that, yeah, a lot of times we end up making these simple decisions that branches and comes back. And that is because as a writer, as an editor, and as a game designer, you have these story beats that you want to hit, right? So for example, for a hero's journey type of story, you have this thing of facing a challenge, overcoming a challenge, and then that overcoming of a challenge having a twist, and then you have a longer travel, and then now eventually the growth of the character. That's the kind of general formula for one of these type of narratives. In order to achieve that in every player's experience, especially when we're focusing on the fact that this is a narrative experience, this is an interactive fiction where we're telling a story with players making decisions that changes the course of the story in a certain way, it helps us to make decisions, to branch out, to feel that I have a control over certain aspect of the story, long-term, short-term, relational things, but it still guarantees the players to follow along with these narrative beats that makes it satisfying, right? So these narrative beats and structures exist because it has been, proven to be successful. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that because it exists and there are so many people who have studied this narrative forms that this is the answer. It goes to say, hey, these things exist for reasons. And if you understand the reason behind it, then you are free to change components that you feel is necessary to fulfill certain feelings. So yeah, that's very important, it turns out, for Starfinder as well. When we said, oh, this is not just tabletop RPG of you do whatever you want as a sandbox, then the game would have been completely different. However, we decided on the fact that this is narrative and interactive fiction. There's a story that needs to be followed. So we'll sacrifice some of the explosive decisions in order to bring out a better experience and also technically be better. So yeah.
That's it. That seems like a great time to that's the official presentation, and now some QA, even though I know, Bradley, we're butting up against time.
We are, but we'll cram these in here real quick. Gentlemen, that was great. Great job, and really interesting about the just the whole anecdote of the character, and you were going to have, the ability to not have the companion or have the companion, and then figuring out, walking through the journey of figuring that out. I'm going to hit these questions real quick. Two of them relate to, how did you do the character voices, voice actors or text to speech?
It is voice actors. It's a cast of 11 narrators who we primarily worked with from Audible. And then we had the great fortune to work with Laura Bailey and Nathan Fillion, who also voice characters in the series.
Excellent. From Seiji, what audio devices are typically used for the game? Alexa, headphones, other. How do you account for the variations with the audio devices?
Absolutely. What a wonderful question. So, one of the benefits, we just use a data-driven approach. Most folks play on an Echo Dot, followed by the Fire TV, followed by the Echo Show, followed by just the traditional Echo, and the mobile app. Sorry, the Alexa mobile app. And so our Q&A team focused on, so we would test in every locale on those 5 devices. And then that's how we would end up getting an understanding for which one of those, how they sound on each device.
Question for you, Jonathan. How did you test the immersive audio once it was implemented across devices? What was your process there?
So we had to design for the Alexa format, which is a very low quality format. So we didn't have the option of kind of, you know, meeting in the middle as far as audio quality goes. It shouldn't say a low quality audio format. It's just what's supported on these devices by need. So what we had the game activated, the alpha version activated on one of our devices that we could test our audio in. And we also, in Pro Tools, we built the system where we had a bus that allowed us to kind of monitor in a similar quality that this would come out as, so that we could kind of mix as we went based on what this was ultimately going to sound like versus what, you know, the full quality WAV files that I played today.
Excellent. And we got one more. And Henrik, I see your question here. I'll connect you to these folks afterward if you want to do that. We have time for one more. And Chris, I'll leave you with this. How much did it cost to produce?
Fair. We're unable to say, but cheaper than you might think.
All right. Yeah, fair enough. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being part of the Voice of Gaming with us. Great job. Very interesting project. Congratulations to you for the success of it. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having us, and really appreciate being able to talk about it.
You got it.